Welcome to our exploration of legal rights and personality in jurisprudence. In this video, we'll break down the fundamental concepts that shape our understanding of rights, duties, and the legal recognition of individuals and entities. Whether you're a law student or just curious about how legal systems structure relationships, this journey will clarify the core principles that underpin modern law. Let's begin by understanding why the study of legal rights is central to the protection and regulation of society. Esley Hohfeld, a Harvard law professor, revolutionized the way we analyze legal rights by introducing an 8-term framework. His model organizes rights, duties, privileges, and other legal interests into correlatives and opposites, providing clarity on how these concepts interact. Hohfeld's tables help us see that every right has a corresponding duty, and every privilege has a corresponding no right. This analytical approach is crucial for understanding the internal structure of legal relationships. Hohfeld's framework divides legal interests into pairs, correlatives, and opposites. For example, if one person has a right, another has a duty. If someone has a privilege, another has a no right. Similarly, power and liability, immunity and disability are paired. These relationships are not just theoretical, they shape how courts interpret and enforce legal claims. Understanding these pairs helps us see the balance and structure within legal system. Legal rights are not just abstract ideas, they can be enforced. If someone's right is violated, they can bring a lawsuit against the person with the corresponding duty. Privileges, on the other hand, can serve as defenses in court. Powers allow individuals or courts to create or change legal relationships, while immunities protect against certain legal actions. These mechanisms ensure that rights are meaningful and not just theoretical. Ownership of property is often described as a bundle of rights. This means that owning something gives you multiple legal powers, such as the right to exclude others, transfer ownership, or grant privileges like easements. Others may have certain privileges like flying over your land, but your core rights remain protected. This bundle concept helps us understand the complexity of property law and the various relationships it creates. Laws exist to regulate human society, protecting individuals and maintaining order. When people interact, they acquire rights and duties towards one another, all governed by the prevailing legal system. The state plays a crucial role in enforcing these rights and duties, using its authority to punish violations and ensure justice. This foundational principle underscores the importance of law in everyday life. Duty is an obligatory act, something one must do or refrain from doing as required by law. Duties are the flip side of rights. Where there is a right, there is a corresponding duty. Duties can be moral or legal, and their breach can result in wrongs or legal consequences. This duality is essential for maintaining balance and fairness in society. Duties can be classified in several ways. First, there are moral duties, which are based on ethical standards, and legal duties, which are enforceable by law. Duties can also be positive, requiring action, or negative, requiring restraint. Additionally, duties are categorized as primary, existing independently, or secondary, arising to enforce other duties, and as absolute, owed to the state, or relative, owed to individuals. Absolute duties are owed only to the state, and their breach is considered a crime, punishable by law. Relative duties, on the other hand, are owed to other individuals, and their breach leads to civil injuries, which are typically remedied by compensation. This distinction helps clarify the different ways in which duties function within the legal system. Legal philosopher John Austin identified 4 kinds of duties: duties to oneself, such as not committing suicide; public duties, like not causing a public nuisance; duties towards non-human entities, such as animals or God; and duties towards the sovereign. These categories reflect the broad scope of obligations recognized by law. Salmond, another influential legal thinker, rejected the concept of absolute duties. He argued that there can be no duty without a corresponding right. This perspective emphasizes the interconnectedness of rights and duties, reinforcing the idea that legal relationships are built on mutual obligations. Legal rights have been defined in various ways by scholars. Salmond described a right as an interest recognized and protected by justice. Hohfeld saw it as the power to enforce legal limitations on conduct. Gray defined it as the power to compel others to act or refrain from acting. These definitions highlight the protective and compelling nature of legal rights. Supreme Court has clarified that, in a strict sense, legal rights are always correlated with legal duties. They are interests protected by law through the imposition of duties on others. More broadly, the term right can also refer to immunity from the legal power of others. This dual perspective enriches our understanding of what it means to have a legal right. There are 2 main theories about the nature of legal rights: the will theory and the interest theory. The will theory, supported by thinkers like Hume, Hegel, and Kant, sees rights as expressions of human will. The interest theory, championed by Eyring, focuses on rights as legally protected interests. Both theories offer valuable insights into why rights exist and how they function. Will theory posits that rights are inherent attributes of human will. Through rights, individuals express their will over objects or actions. Legal scholars like Puchta and Vinogradov expanded on this, noting that rights are powers over objects, but that individual freedom is limited by the rights of others. Austin and Holland added that rights involve obligations on others and permissions to exercise certain powers. Interest theory, mainly advanced by Eyring, argues that a legal right is a legally protected interest. The focus here is on the protection of human interests and the avoidance of conflicts. However, critics like Salmond pointed out that state recognition is also essential. Rights must be both protected and recognized by law. Gray and Allen offered nuanced views, suggesting that both will and interest are important elements. Legal rights consist of 5 essential elements: the person of inheritance, the subject of the right; the person of incidence, the one bound by duty; the content of the right, the act or omission required; the subject matter, the object involved; and the title, the fact or event giving rise to the right. Each element plays a vital role in defining and enforcing legal rights. Consider a testator who leaves a gold ring to a legatee. Here, the legatee is the person of inheritance, the gold ring is the subject matter, the delivery of the ring is the content, the executor is the person of incidence, and the act of bequeathing is the title. This example shows how all elements come together in a real-life legal scenario. Legal rights are enforced through the courts, which are established by the state. The main methods of enforcement include awarding damages in civil cases and granting injunctions to prevent harmful actions. These remedies ensure that rights are not just theoretical but have practical, enforceable value. Salmon suggested that rights can be understood more broadly. Besides the core concept of rights, there are liberties, actions one may do without interference; powers, actions one can do effectively against others; and immunities, protections against others' actions. This broader view helps us appreciate the full spectrum of legal protections. Legal rights can be perfect or imperfect. A perfect right corresponds to a legal duty and is both recognized and enforceable by law. An imperfect right, while recognized, is not enforceable, such as a time-barred debt. This distinction is important for understanding the limits of legal protection. Rights are also classified as positive or negative depending on the nature of the corresponding duty. If someone is required to do something, it's a positive right. If someone must refrain from doing something, it's a negative right. This classification helps clarify the obligations attached to different types of rights. Proprietary rights relate to economic or monetary interests such as money, land, or debts. Personal rights, on the other hand, concern individual well-being like reputation, freedom, or liberty. Understanding this distinction helps clarify the scope and purpose of different legal rights. Rights in re propria are rights over one's own property, while rights in re aliena are rights over someone else's property. For example, owning land is a right in re propria, while having an easement over a neighbor's land is a right in re aliena. This distinction is key in property law. Principal rights are independent, while accessory rights are ancillary to principal rights. For instance, owning a piece of land is a principal right, but having a right-of-way over adjoining land is an accessory right. This relationship helps organize complex legal entitlements. When a right is vested in the state, it is a public right. Private rights, by contrast, are held by individuals. Public rights often relate to societal interests, while private rights focus on individual interests. This distinction is foundational in legal systems worldwide. Jus ad rem refers to a right that originates from another right. For example, a person entitled to receive property has a jus ad rem, which is the right to have another right transferred to them. This concept is especially relevant in property and contract law. Law, a person is an entity recognized as having rights and interests. Legal personality allows entities, whether real human beings or artificial corporations, to act, own property, enter contracts, and be held accountable. This abstraction is essential for organizing legal relationships in society. Natural persons are human beings, automatically recognized as legal persons. Artificial persons, like corporations, are legal fictions created by law with limited capacities. While natural persons can do anything not prohibited by law, artificial persons can only act within the scope defined by their legal documents. Capacity is the ability to perform acts and enter into relationships recognized by law. It is the foundation of legal personality, enabling entities to claim rights, own property, enter contracts, and participate in legal proceedings. Without capacity, legal personality would be meaningless. Corporate personality refers to the legal recognition of groups like companies as single entities distinct from their members. This allows corporations to own property, sue, and be sued independently of their shareholders. The doctrine of the corporate veil separates the company's actions and liabilities from those of its members. Corporation sole is a legal office that continues perpetually, such as the English Crown or the President of India. A corporation aggregate is a group of individuals acting as a single legal person, like a joint stock company. Both forms ensure continuity and legal recognition beyond individual members. The veil of incorporation is a legal concept that separates the personality of a corporation from its members. This means that liabilities and actions of the company are distinct from those of its shareholders. This separation is crucial for limited liability and the functioning of modern business entities. Not all groups are recognized as corporations. Partnerships, trade unions, and other organizations are often unincorporated, meaning they do not have separate legal personality. However, statutory and judicial developments have sometimes allowed these groups to act as single legal persons in certain contexts. There are 5 main theories explaining corporate personality: fiction theory, concession theory, purpose theory, symbolist theory, and realist theory. Each offers a different perspective on how and why corporations are recognized as legal persons. Fiction theory, supported by jurists like Savigny and Blackstone, holds that corporate personality is a legal fiction, an artificial creation of the law. The famous Salomon v. Salomon case established that a company once properly constituted is a person at law, distinct from its members. The concession theory argues that the state, as a sovereign, grants legal personality to corporations. Without this concession, corporations would not exist as legal persons. This theory emphasizes the role of the state in creating and regulating corporate entities. The purpose theory, or Zweckvermögen, sees juristic persons as property dedicated to a particular purpose, not as groups of people. The property is legally bound to certain objects or goals and does not belong to any individual. This theory is especially relevant for trusts and foundations. The bracket or symbolist theory, developed by Ihering, treats corporate personality as an economic device for simplifying legal relations. It allows the law to treat groups as single entities, but also to look behind the entity when necessary, such as in cases of fraud or abuse. The realist theory, championed by Otto von Gierke, asserts that corporations are real entities with their own existence, not just legal fictions. According to this view, corporations are social organisms and the law simply recognizes their reality. This theory contrasts sharply with the fiction theory. The main debate in corporate personality theory is between the fiction and realist perspectives. The fiction theory sees corporations as artificial constructs, while the realist theory views them as real, living entities. This debate shapes how courts and lawmakers approach corporate rights and responsibilities. Corporate personality brings several key attributes: perpetual succession, the ability to own property, the right to sue and be sued, the power to create floating charges, and limited liability. These features make corporations powerful and flexible tools for economic and social activity. Corporate personality is not absolute. The law may lift the corporate veil to look behind the entity and hold individuals accountable, especially in cases of fraud or abuse. This ensures that the concept of corporate personality serves justice, not just convenience. Legal personality is a metaphor that helps organize and describe the rights and responsibilities of entities. As Bryant Smith noted, it should not dictate outcomes but serve as a tool for analysis. The real question is always about the merits of each case, not just the label of person or corporation. In summary, the concepts of legal rights and personality are foundational to jurisprudence. They shape how individuals and entities interact, how rights are protected, and how responsibilities are enforced. By understanding these principles, we gain insight into the living law that governs society and ensures justice for all.